I feel like there are a lot of videos these days where people reminisce about internet horror in the 2000s and 2010s, where the history of the creepypasta is reiterated over and over. We look back on this time through the lens of it being outdated and embarrassing, but I have a soft spot for staying up late when I shouldn't have, listening to or reading a tall tale on the internet, and being too scared to creep into my hallway. So, let's relive the tradition. Turn down the lights and huddle up under the covers and grab a drink. I'm not going anywhere. This is my retrospective on some of my favorite creepypastas. One classic genre of creepypasta is when somebody finds a genuinely unsettling image and writes a story around it. I'm sure you're all familiar with Smile Dog or The Rake, and I'd even argue that something like The Backrooms falls into this category. There are even cases where the image is more intriguing and terrifying than the story attached to it. I guess what I'm getting at is that the idea of some creepypastas hit harder than the actual stories themselves. Reading the actual lore of Slender Man today doesn't do anything for me, but if you show me one of these images where he's lurking in the background of some foggy forest, nestled between the trees, it's enough to make you look over your shoulder. It definitely plays on some of our innate, primal fears. You know that there might be a predator lurking somewhere in the shadows, but by the time you notice it, it might be just too late. But the images I associate most with Slender Man aren't the more modern-day photographs with him lurking in the background. It's this one. Known simply as The Knight, this woodcut depicts an armored man fighting off what we know as the Slender Man. As gullible as I was, and still am, this image did not make me believe that Slender Man was real, but it did make me believe that he was based on a legend from the 16th century. Like all Slender Man images, this one is also edited, but the original woodcut by Hans Holbein the Younger is still fantastic. There's also this one, by the same artist, where the Slender Man-like figure appears to be leading a child away from his family, this one being more heavily edited than The Knight. I do highly recommend looking through the entire collection of Hans Holbein's woodcuts. It's not for nothing that these have been described as the most marvelous woodcuts ever made. You might wonder why death leading people away was such a common theme in his art. Many artists of the time created allegorical danse macabre pieces, meant to symbolize death's universality. And really, what else is horror about? Fear is meant to keep us alive, but no matter who you are or how good your fear is at helping you avoid an early grave, nobody can avoid the Reaper forever. If we're talking about creepypastas that leave a lasting impact, I think the quintessential one to talk about is Gateway of the Mind. Sure, monsters like Slender Man or The Rake are creepy, but Gateway of the Mind might have been one of my first brushes with existential horror. It's a very simple story. A group of scientists have a hypothesis that a human without senses would be able to make contact with God. An old man with nothing left to live for volunteers as the only test subject, and the scientists surgically remove his ability to see, hear, taste, smell, and feel. The man begins recounting communications he has with voices, and eventually his dead wife. But it's not until he begins reciting the names of the scientist's dead relatives that had passed on did they begin to believe that it was more than psychosis. The man continues to hear voices until the frequency increases so much that it becomes torturous for him. Weeks go by, with his pain increasing. More and more sedatives have to be administered to him, and in his final 2 weeks, all he can do is stare blankly at the ceiling and cry. At the end of this story, the man turns and makes direct eye contact with one of the scientists, and utters, "I have spoken with God, and he has abandoned us," before his vital signs completely stop. I think the reason that this creepypasta always got me was because it really instills a feeling of cosmic hopelessness. The experiment that the scientists conduct seems so simple, as though anyone could, at the cost of their senses, gain contact with the afterlife. But this afterlife is not the romanticized version that we sometimes think of, where there is a better place waiting for us. No, it's a cacophonous void of thousands of souls latching onto their one connection to the living, because as we know, they clearly can't reach God. The story indicates that the test subject clawed at his non-functional eyes and threw himself against the walls of the test chamber to feel anything of the living world. A man who all we knew of him was that he had nothing left to live for. If he wanted so desperately to return to the land of the living, then there must be something truly horrible waiting for us after death. It's almost better, in real life, not having a definite answer to if we're truly alone in the universe or not. Be it a higher power, or life outside our solar system. But in the world of this story, to know that there is a God, and he chose to abandon humanity, is nothing short of horrifying. I'll make this section short, because I'm not going to discuss the entire creepypasta of Ben Drowned here. There are plenty of videos which do that much better than I ever could, but I don't think it's controversial to say that it's the quintessential gaming creepypasta. Anybody can make up an outlandish tale about their favorite game becoming obscenely horrific, but Ben Drowned was one of the few which, at the time, backed it up with some of the most convincing footage you could find for a story like this. It made it feel real. That's the whole reason I brought this story up. To me, the benchmark of a great creepypasta is the feeling of, this could be real. This is entirely my own opinion, but the closer a story is to reality, the scarier it is. Any piece of horror would of course be scary if it happened to you in real life, but a haunted game cartridge is pretty low on the list of things that could potentially bring harm to any of us. This one is also known as Disneyland 1999. It's incredibly short, just over 200 words, but something about it really gets me, and I don't know why. I'll read the story in full just because of how short it is. In 1999, my family visited Disneyland. We happily rode the Small World ride. I was 12 at the time and my sister was 6. We loved every moment, and our parents smiled with nostalgia. At one time near the end, some lights suddenly shut off and rear lights illuminated the ceiling. The moving display parts shut off and crew members wearing red overalls walked along them to help passengers in the boats onto the stages to direct them out of the building via emergency exits. A voice came over the loudspeakers. "Disneyland thanks you for your visit. Please evacuate the attraction in an orderly fashion. Keep looking forward and follow the directions of staff. Thank you." The staff wouldn't tell us much as they quickly ushered us out of the building. Ambulances were outside and a police car was parked in the main walkway. At the time, my mother still had her camera out and snapped a few photos of the crewmen and close-ups of the mechanical children. She snapped a few last-minute photos of whatever to use up the last roll of the film on the camera, since we were going to develop them later that afternoon. This was the last photo on the reel, aimed at the ceiling of the attraction. Do I think the story is fake? Of course I do. But the fact that there's nothing outwardly disproving its veracity, paired with the attached image, it sends a chill down my spine. Let me put it this way. Most creepypastas are enhanced when I can go out of them with the belief that they could have happened in the real world, however unlikely that may be. For this one, I want to believe that it isn't real. You already know what's up when you hear this music. This is another creepypasta that thrives mostly based on the idea it leaves me with, rather than the contents of the story itself. The story really isn't anything too special. It basically just describes an unused boss in Pokemon Red and Blue that would crash the game if the player won against it, and cause a game over screen if the player lost, as well as permanently altering that Game Boy startup to display the game over image. The buried alive character devouring the protagonist. You want to know the part that unnerves me? The fact that this is probably a human. A human who, as the name suggests, was accidentally buried alive. And I think the fact that we know nothing else about this thing only adds to the horror. We don't really even know who it is, what gender it is, the age it was buried, anything. Was it even buried with a gravestone? Is it something older than the tower itself? This thing that is so far gone from humanity only has one descriptor. that it was buried alive, put to rest before it was ready, for some reason we'll never know. Much like Gateway of the Mind, perhaps this creature's desire for flesh is the only way it knows how to reach back and dig its claws into the land of the living, for it knows that a peaceful death never awaited it. This is all just one interpretation of an admittedly bare-bones creepypasta, and I wouldn't say that mine is correct, but it can be fun to ascribe more meaning than is necessary to something like this. If you want a very simplified version of it, it's that death is scary, plain and simple. Admittedly, the great sprite work associated with this pasta also does a lot for me, and it was made by Queen Kami. I know some may say it's just a generic zombie, but for mostly working within the sprite limitations of the original Pokemon games, I'd say it's pretty damn good. And it's an iconic part of the creepypasta genre as a whole now. By the way, if you're curious about the footage being shown here, it's actually running in emulator. It's a save file modification done by Cello2WC. There'll be a link to it in the description. This is another one that I'll read in full. There was a hunter in the woods who, after a long day of hunting, was in the middle of an immense forest. It was getting dark, and having lost his bearings, he decided to head in one direction until he was clear of the increasingly oppressive foliage. After what seemed like hours, he came across a cabin in a small clearing. Realizing how dark it had grown, he decided to see if he could stay there for the night. He approached and found the door ajar. Nobody was inside. The hunter laid down on the single bed, deciding to explain himself to the owner in the morning. As he looked around, he was surprised to see the walls adorned by many portraits, all painted with incredible detail. Without exception, they appeared to be staring down at him, their features twisted into looks of hatred. Staring back, he grew increasingly uncomfortable. Making a concerted effort to ignore the many hateful faces, he turned to face the wall, and exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep. Face down in an unfamiliar bed, he turned, blinking, in unexpected sunlight. Looking up, he discovered the cabin had no portraits, only windows. It's so simple and feels the most like a classic campfire story, more than any other creepypasta I've read. It takes that fear of looking out of a window at night, not knowing what could be lurking in the darkness, and amplifies it by 100. Servine Birth might be my favorite creepypasta in terms of the imagery that the author is able to craft. It's written in sort of a documentarian way. The author describes an experimental film in which an albino deer gives birth to a strange deer-human hybrid. The best way I can describe this story is like a photograph of a photograph. It's not so much a character recounting a creepy video they've seen like so many other creepypastas, but it nonetheless paints a frightening picture of what exactly the author claims to have seen. Out of all the creepypastas in this video, I'd say this is one you should read in full, or watch a narration of. It's truly underrated and disgustingly horrific. Let's end off with one of the most real creepypastas there is, if you believe it. Let me explain. You might know this creepypasta as The Three Kings. It's a ritual pasta, wherein you have to set up 3 chairs, 2 mirrors on each side, a candle, a fan, and yourself as the main ingredients, set up like this. All of this needs to be done by precisely 3:33 in the morning. After sitting in the central chair, blocking the candle from the fan with your own body, you must stare straight forward and focus on the darkness. Out of the corner of your eyes, you should actually see other people sitting in the chairs. The purpose of all this is, well, the original author won't say, but it's certainly quite ominous just thinking about it. Now, I'm sure you've pieced together why this story is among the most real. Even if you have no belief in the occult, it's a well-known phenomenon that you will hallucinate if you stare at your own reflection for long enough in low light conditions. It's the reason why the Bloody Mary ritual also works. Having to wake up at 3 in the morning, combined with the low light of a candle, and the requirement to absolutely not stop facing forward until an entire hour passes, I'd be surprised if someone followed all these steps and didn't see anything. I know you're probably thinking, I should give this a shot, just to see if it's real or not, but I implore you to refer to the title. Please don't actually try this. As much as I would have liked to end the video with that last line, I have to give credit to the people that this video wouldn't have been possible without. First of them being you, of course. And I'm not talking about the general viewer here, I'm talking about you, Tori. But for real, thank you all for watching. These photos of the books seen in the portrait section were taken by my sister. This 3D model of the room in the previous section was made by Axolion. Any authors for the original creepypastas were included in the title cards for each section, but a large number of the ones I talked about today don't really have a known author. That kind of just comes with the territory though, like Servine Birth literally just comes from a post on X, so there's pretty much no way of knowing who the hell wrote it, but you could argue that this makes the stories more mysterious. Regardless, links to everything I could find, including footage, images, the stories themselves, and the social media links to everyone I mentioned will all be in the description. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comments. Happy Halloween, everyone. Maybe I'll make this a yearly tradition. That is, if I manage to put out more than 2 videos a year. If this sounds like something that's interesting to you, consider subscribing. That's all for now. Good night.